Alright, welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we have the Lethal Gaming Gear Venus Pro. So it's a mousepad review. Right, I have quite a few mousepad reviews coming up actually, and I'm really excited because I think I found one that's almost near my end game. We'll talk about that in the next video, but for now we'll focus on this. I bought this with my own money because heaps of people were telling me, hey, you gotta try the Venus Pro. You know, you like the Spyre Loque, you like the Hayate Otsu. This is like the Lethal Gaming Gear equivalent, or similar, and you have to try it. You know, this might be the end game I was searching for. Eventually, I was like, alright, fine, I'll buy it, I'll give it a go. If I don't like it, or if I don't like it enough, I can sell it out again after I make this review, but maybe this will be the end game, or maybe it will be for some people elsewhere. We'll start with the details and features, we'll jump straight into it. This is the 500x500 square version, not the rectangular version. This size costs $90 from Osmod Shop. The regular 490x420 version will cost 80 Australian dollars from Osmod Shop. Now it is a hybrid cloth pad and is part of the Lethal Gaming Gear Pro series. Now I know the Saturn Pro is a more popular one, but that kind of speed is no longer something I personally would prefer, so I don't see myself buying that, but if I can somehow get my hands on one, I will review it. Now, the base is not actually Poron. So the Saturn Pro was using Poron for their base, but not anymore. Now on the Venus Pro, if you look on their website, it doesn't actually say that this is a proper Poron base, but the base looks like Poron, feels like Poron, acts like Poron, so I don't really have any complaints there. You know, it still has that kind of peeling feel when you lift it off your desk. It is a 3.5mm thickness. I think the Artisans are usually 4mm thickness, and it's supposed to be an X-Soft pad. But honestly, it really doesn't feel as plush or premium like the Artisan X-Softs do. Now, the only time that it does that is if you intentionally press on it, you can still feel that, hey, it is a pretty soft pad and all of that. But during actual gameplay or when you move around the mouse, it doesn't really feel like it's an X-Soft. Nonetheless, that's not an issue at all in terms of gameplay. That's just something for you guys to know. The stitching is excellent, right? This is their Pro Series. This is supposed to be like an Artisan alternative, and by all means, they've definitely done that. There are some loose fibers here and there on the stitching, but that is to be expected. It's literally the same as Artisans would be, as the Spyre Loque would be. All the stitch pads that I've come across will have some loose fibers here and there. No issue at all whatsoever. Very good. It is a textured pad. When I first looked at it, it looked like a key into my memory, but it definitely doesn't play like one. One other thing to note is that even though it's textured, it is not abrasive at all to the touch and actually feels alright on your arm. So if you guys are worried that it's going to be abrasive to your skin, don't worry, that's not really an issue. This is nowhere near as abrasive as a Heian is in my memory. It works with an arm sleeve, but not ideally, right? This arm sleeve does drag on the mouse pad a little bit more, and it does get a little bit sticky when you sweat into the arm sleeve and it's hot and humid. Now the pad is not affected by humidity at all and whatsoever. It's just personally, I sweat a lot, especially right now, hot Australian summer. In my room, all of these electronic devices are mini heaters, so I sweat. My arm sleeve does get a little bit sticky, and regardless of what pad I'm using, I can generally still feel that, you know, it's kind of hard to move my arm around on the table. And during those super hot, super sweaty moments, this really does start catching onto my arm and I can't really move that. Now, it's not a pad problem, it's just a me problem. The speed of this mousepad is a bit slower than the Loque. So, I don't know why people mention the Hayate Otsu when they talk about this. They should mention the Spyre Loque instead. But I also guess not many people have tried the Spyre Loque. It is nothing like the Hayate Otsu. Alright, we'll talk about that more later. But I think this is a very, very, very good balance of speed and control. And we can talk about that a bit more in terms of who should buy this mousepad. Just know that it's a really good mousepad. It's kind of hard to talk about speed and control and everything these days about mousepads without really comparing it to another, because everyone has their own experiences with different pads already. Give you a quick glide test. This is the stock skates on the XM2WE. Review coming out soon as well. This is now my main mouse. That's a bit of a hint if anyone is wondering. So as you can see, it just glides pretty nice. You know, this is the most important part. Who should buy this pad? Well, if you guys were used to main a control pad, the Zero, the Saturn, or generic mousepads like the QCK, the GSR, the GSRSC, and whatever, and you want a little bit faster, but you're always like, oh, I'm worried I can't control it, I don't want to go too fast. This is what you've been looking for, and this is the end game. This is how you get a bit faster than the control pads without sacrificing too much control. In terms of buying the Loque or the Hayate Otsu, which people generally consider the next step up from the Zero, those are way faster. As your aim gets better, you will prefer faster, because now that you are able to control it, there's just no benefit of using the slower pad, as long as your controller is good enough. Now, many players don't actually go aim training, even if they're really good at tac shooters. You know, some of the best players in OC in the past, they don't play Kovacs, they can't aim in Kovacs for their life, but you go into the game and they're just a different animal. Many prefer slow pads for tac shooters. I think eventually, as you get better, everyone should try to move faster, and that should help you gradually increase your skill level. I think this is pretty much what most people should eventually look for. right? All the people on the Artisan Zeros, on the Saturns, and they're like, oh, this is it. Well, try this, right? Get used to something like this. Oh my god, this is pretty much where that endgame is. I think this is like the perfect balance of where a control and speed pad should be interjecting. Now, I used to say that for the Loque and the Otsu, but now that I think about it, I still feel like that might be too fast for certain people for tac shooters. Something like the Otsu is perfect as a middle point between tac shooters and fast-paced games. I think the Loque is slightly slower than that, but I think this is the fastest tac shooter control mousepad you'll ever need. Now, obviously, everyone has different preferences. If you're like me, you might want even faster and faster or whatever as you play low sense or your aim gets better. And if you play different games, not tac shooters, you might also prefer the faster pads if you're an Apex Overwatch grinder. But that doesn't change the fact that this is where it is for the tac shooters. Do some comparisons. I think that's the easiest way to get this done. This is the Spyre Loque. If you haven't watched the review of this, you need to go watch the review of this. One thing to note, the Loque is also a 500x500 square base, so that's great. I love that. We'll just make this quick. The Loque is cheaper, right? It's cheaper, you get the same size pad for a much lower cost. But it has a worse base. This is just a generic rubberized base. You can't expect them to be dumping money into making fancy bases. Also, the Loque is worse to the physical touch, right? I prefer physically touching Venus Pro a lot more than the Loque. The Loque is a lot smoother on an arm sleeve than the Venus Pro is. I think the Loque might also have better durability because it is Cordura material. If you haven't watched the review, go watch the review. I'll talk about that more over there. The Loque is also slightly faster. The stitching quality isn't as good as the Venus Pro, which is also to be expected because the Venus Pro is supposed to be a more premium mousepad. By stitching quality not as good, I mean that when you compare it, the Venus Pro is a lot more dense and nicely stitched along the edges rather than the Loque's ones, which you can see is a lot thicker, a lot more noticeable, and not as dense and smoothed out. With that being said, these two mousepads are much closer than the Hayate Otsu is to them, and I think if you like the Loque or if you like the Venus, you should try the other one. Right, whichever one you've tried and you liked, you should try the other one as well to find out what one you actually prefer more. Next up is the Hayate Otsu here. The Otsu is more expensive. Even though it's smaller, it's more expensive. Now, the Otsu only comes in this normal Artisan XL size. The Venus Pro comes in two sizes, and the smaller Venus Pro is the same size as the Artisan. I think that's 490 times 420. The Artisans, especially this Hayate Otsu, definitely has the better base. It's a lot more nicely padded, thick, plush, whatever you want to call it, and it feels a lot more premium. Also, it's nicer to the touch physically, and it works better with the arm sleeve. It's probably slightly less durable. If anything, I think both the Loque and the Venus Pro are probably more durable than the Otsu, but the Otsu overall is definitely still the more premium, better build quality mousepad. Long-term durability aside, when you first get the mousepad, you can tell which one is premium, which one is a nice build quality. Even if it wears out over time, off the bat, you just know that the Artisans are still more premium. Speed-wise, the Otsu is definitely faster than both of these. I think the differences aren't too big of a jump. Nonetheless, I think the Venus presents the nice middle ground between something like the Otsu speed and something like its control pad of the Zero and Saturn. So if you want to see the glide test, I guess the glide test doesn't show things too accurately because I can't put the same force every time. So that's just something you're going to have to take. As you can see, the Venus definitely doesn't move as much as it does on the other two pads. To make this nice and quick, the summary, the Venus Pro is an excellent pad. This is one of the best pads on the market, definitely. I think this is endgame worthy for many players, especially attack shooter players. The ones that have lived with their control pad for long enough and are ready to take the next step up, but you don't ever realistically need to go faster than this for the attack shooters. I think this is where you can go to this speed, control it at this speed, and that should be as fast as you need it to be. This is roughly where the peak is. Players who have only ever used control pads and aren't super focused on saying, I always want to aim train, I always want to push for that better aim, because lots of pro players don't even aim train, right? They don't need to, they don't go through that. They'll train their aim up to a certain extent, and there's a lot more factors in gameplay rather than aiming. And therefore, I think this is the point where you'll easily learn to aim on this. That will present you exactly what you've been looking for. Like I keep saying, Artisan is still more premium than the Venus Pro at least. Can't say with the Saturn Pro, I don't have that. 500x500 size is nice though. I wish they did that for all the pads. I do think maybe the Poron-based Saturn Pro could match the Artisans. That is honestly it for this quick review. I bought this and I was like, wow, this is actually super impressive. I don't understand why the Venus isn't talked about much compared to the Saturn Pro, but I honestly think that this is where more people should look into rather than the Saturn Pro. You guys gotta try one of these. Very good pad. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one.